In the world of Clair Obscur Expedition 33, the Paintress is thought to be the destroyer of the world. Her painted numbers are the symbol of endless suffering and death, and the expeditions risk and lose their lives, trying to put an end to her destruction. It isn't until Expedition 33 that the truth is revealed. The Paintress isn't the source of the destruction and pain for the people of Lumiere, but instead she is their creator and protector. And underneath, the Paintress is simply a mother grieving the loss of her son. So who is the Paintress? Alen was a skilled painter, dancer, musician, and artist. She was head of the Painters' Council and taught her husband Renoir everything he knew. Alen and Renoir painted hundreds of canvas worlds together. She taught him how every day spent within the canvas had a price. And when Renoir was consumed by his own creation, it was Alen who brought him back. They loved each other deeply, and they would pass down their love of creation to their 3 children. Alen, being the accomplished painter that she was, taught her children to paint at a very young age. Clea was a natural and approached painting similarly to Alen. Unfortunately for Verso, he wasn't very interested in painting, and he only ever painted 1 canvas world as a child. Instead, he was more musically inclined, and eventually Alen helped to teach him how to play her piano. He loved music and would even write songs for his little sister Alysia. Alysia was also not like her mother, and instead of loving painting like Clea or music like Verso, Alysia loved to read and write. Alen was hard on Alysia because of it. And despite Alysia painting several canvases, Alen only deemed 1 worthy enough to hang up on the manor walls. Alen was a perfectionist. She only wanted the best, and she wanted that for her children as well. And her children felt that pressure. Clea would eventually surpass Alen in her skills, constantly chasing perfection just like her mother. For Verso, he would try to appease his mother, but would also let her down by not following in her footsteps. But it was Alysia who would disappoint her mother the most. She would defy her mother and become close with the writers, a dangerous group that the painters had been warring with. On December 33, 1905, a fire was started at the Dandre home by the writers. The details are unknown, but they would use Alysia and her love of writing to somehow gain access to the family home and set it on fire. Alysia herself would be badly burned, but her life would be saved by her brother Verso, who sacrificed himself to save her. This event would be the catalyst to the creation of the Paintress. What happened directly after the fire and how much time passed before the events of Expedition 33 are unknown, but it seems like Renoir dove headfirst into his paintings, using it as a way to stave off his grief. But unfortunately, he wouldn't be there for his wife when she needed him the most. The two had already been struggling with their marriage, with flashbacks showing Alen walking away from him and Clea telling Alysia that they've done this before. But it seems their problems went even deeper. Alen was no longer wearing her wedding ring, only Renoir was. Painted Renoir also says that Alen made him inherit the grief of losing Verso, because he wasn't there when she needed him. Renoir, so consumed in his own paintings, wasn't there for Alen after Verso's death. And with Alysia becoming a ghost and Clea fighting her solitary war against the writers, each family member was lost in their grief alone. Alen was alone. In the final confrontation, when Alen re-enters the painting, she tells Renoir to go paint something else, and she's full of anger and resentment. She seems mad at Renoir for painting, for losing himself in his grief by throwing himself into his work, leaving her behind. Even the fading remnants of Renoir within the painting regret not recognizing the changes in Alen, how the two used to paint for the process of creation, and how he didn't realize when that changed. How he didn't realize that Alen changed. She pulled away from him. This is evident in every one of their interactions. The songs of Alen and Renoir also tell this story, of the love lost, of the fading bonds, of the anger and resentment from Alen. and the desperation to save their marriage from Renoir. A life to love you is Alen telling Renoir to stop loving her, to leave the canvas. It's also Renoir telling Alen how he's fighting for their love, that he will keep on loving her. It's about the loss of their son and the loss of their love. Even his song titled Renoir is once again about Alen, how she used to live, how she hates, and how here she will only wither. All of Renoir's songs are about his love for Alen and about his desperation to save her from herself. Even Renoir's song Dueliste is about Alen trapping him under the monolith, how he lost his spirit, but he still fights to save her, which is really what Seren is about. I've included my entire Seren video at the end of this one, which dives even deeper into Renoir and Alen's relationship and dynamic. So if you haven't seen it, you can just watch this entire video. But the songs tell a story of a woman who used to be gentle and enchanting. They then tell the story of a woman who changed, how she lost herself, and how Renoir still sees the woman he loves underneath. Everything we know about these two through their music tells us how disconnected they were, how even before Alen became the Paintress, their marriage was falling apart, and how Verso's death would be the catalyst to revealing just how separated these two had become. It was Verso's death that would make these two go their separate ways. Renoir would create self-portraits of his family and himself, painting them all over the ceiling of his atelier. He was with his family in a way, but he really wasn't. He painted them instead of being with them, and Alen grew to resent him because of it. I think that's why she's so hostile towards Seren in the final fight. The atelier is filled with Renoir's work. You can see all of the axons that he's put on the ceilings and on different canvases, but it's also filled with evidence that someone was living there. A mattress, soup cans, even a tub. Newspapers mark the passing days, and it's clear that Renoir was painting so much that he might have isolated himself and had been living here. Either because him and Alen's relationship had become so strained that they were living separate lives within the manor, or because his grief was simply too overwhelming, that he only cared to paint, since he sees this as a way to prove he hasn't given in to the despair. Or maybe this is where Alen was sleeping and living, in between her visits to the canvas, before she decided not to leave. Whatever the truth is, it's clear that one of them was living inside the atelier. And with Alen not wearing her wedding ring, Alen and Renoir's marriage was falling apart, and Verso's death would be a catalyst to a problem that may have already existed. While Renoir lost himself in his paintings, Alen would lose herself gradually inside Verso's painting. Here she would create her painted son and painted family, and painted life in Lumiere. Both Alen and Renoir would be with versions of their family that they created, all while their real families needed them outside of their painted escapes. In Renoir's journal, he says that him and Alen don't even share any commonalities. She refuses to speak, and they no longer share the bonds of grief anymore. They walk separate paths, and he doesn't even exist to her. None of them do. He says she's left us all behind to drown by ourselves, so that she can drown alone. I think this is really what happened to both Alens. Both Alen in the real world after Verso's death, but also Alen inside the canvas. This is what both Renoirs experienced. Renoir and Alen needed each other. Clea and Alysia needed Renoir and Alen. And yet both Renoir and Alen were too lost to help anyone or recognize how much help the rest of their family needed. The Desandre family would completely fall apart. Alysia would become a ghost, lost in her depression and guilt. Clea would become angry and hell-bent on revenge. Alen would become lost in her denial and made-up world. And Renoir would become lost in his work. Alen also seems to be someone who has a tough outer shell, just like Clea, maybe unable to properly express how she feels, or maybe she even sees it as a weakness. I think this is why Renoir lost himself in his own paintings. He, also consumed with grief, would do everything that he could to stay afloat, fighting off his own despair. But I think maybe he simply didn't realize just how much his wife truly needed him until it was too late. Unfortunately, Alen would be driven mad by her grief, floating in nothingness, and only feeling alive inside Verso's canvas. Depression is a black hole. If you've ever been depressed, you understand how brutal the despair is. It ranges from extremely sad to just pure emptiness. It consumes everything you do, everything you love, and everything you feel. Depression is also something that extends past the person suffering from it. It affects relationships, hobbies, and even the necessities to live, like eating. It removes the joy from everything in life. And I'm sure at the very bare minimum, this is what Alen was dealing with. And it was only inside Verso's painting that she could feel something else other than the emptiness. That is the story of the Paintress. A sad, grieving mother, unable to process the loss of her son, completely lost to herself and her depression, becoming someone completely unrecognizable, left to endure her grief alone. She's filled with emptiness, rage, and resentment. Anger and resentment at her husband not realizing she had changed. Anger and resentment at Renoir for not being there. Anger and resentment that Alysia defied her. Anger and resentment at Alysia for being the reason that the fire was started. Anger and resentment would become all that Alen knew. We don't know the exact details of how Alen entered the canvas or when, but I think the White Sands might be where her journey began. The White Sands is an interesting location. There are no enemies, no Nevrons, and there's really nothing to discover here, except for the weird poem and the empty manor. This song was originally going to be used during the beginning prologue, specifically during the Gommage, because that's what the song is about, the death and loss from the Gommage. The song's placement was later moved in development because they still wanted it to be in the game. But what it exactly means here at the White Sands is kind of unknown. But I think there are a few possibilities as to what this location is. The manor is empty, so there's not much to go on inside, but the red chroma petals remind me of Renoir, and the white emptiness reminds me of Alen. Either Alen came here alone at some point, with bags and a bag from Verso's room, maybe even his toys, and here she isolated herself before she began creating the people of Lumiere and Lumiere itself. Maybe this was even where she originally went to grieve alone. Or this is where Renoir would go while he tried to get Alen out of the canvas. I don't think the real Renoir would have gone to Lumiere, the city that Alen had created with her painted family and painted life. Maybe he kept his distance instead, thinking in due time she would be done here. So here is where he stayed and watched and waited, watching over her, creating a little temporary life for him. I don't know, but I fully believe this island and this boat tell a story about Alen or Renoir, or both. The Gommage was an act of love. Maybe this is where it began. Maybe this is where Alen and Renoir's story in the canvas began, before Renoir became imprisoned and before Alen went mad. When Alen started entering the canvas, her family believed it would help her with her grief. And maybe it did at first, but the allure of her pretend life and her very own creations were too powerful. Here she could have the thing that she wanted the most, her dead son. And while she wasn't truly happy here, she said her heart beat here. She felt something other than the nothingness that had been consuming her. This was something that got her out of her depression. Being inside the canvas was her living in denial, but also her desperately searching for a feeling other than the depression that had consumed her. Painted Verso gave her that. She painted Verso with the memories of her real son, except instead of making the fire something that had never happened, in this version of his memories, it would only be Alysia hurt by the fire. Verso would remain untouched. Here, she didn't have to lose her son, and making him immortal meant that she would never have to lose him again, which is exactly what she wanted. She also painted Clea, and while we don't know what painted Clea was like, we know she was probably a softer version of the real Clea, because painted Clea fell in love with Simon. She had a whole life filled with her family and loved ones inside the painting. It seems like painted Clea and painted Verso would be the ones who would receive the kindness of Aline's perceptions, but it was painted Alysia and painted Renoir who were painted to suffer. Alysia would be painted in black and white, which I assume made her unable to live a normal life within the painted world. She didn't look human compared to the people of Lumiere, and at one point she had even been kidnapped. They thought she was a monster. The kidnapping was after painted Renoir was killing all of the expeditioners, so their views may have been because of that. But would the people of Lumiere not see her black and white face, scars, and mask, and be confused? Would she not be othered by them? I think this was intentional. Aline punished her in every way that she could. She made painted Alysia an outsider. Aline's journal talks about the emptiness that she feels, how she floats in an endless nothingness. But it's Alysia who makes her relive the pain. She says, "I cannot be around Alysia. Her pain is a broken mirror, the shards reflecting back tenfold. Every moment with her, the cuts deepen, and I feel myself unraveling. I wonder if she painted Alysia to have her mask, in an attempt to hide her face from Aline." Everything about Alysia's design was cruel. It was filled with the anger and resentment that Aline felt. But most interestingly, in this world where Aline could have painted anything, she still made the fire an event that the family endured. Maybe them all surviving was her way of coping. Or maybe the fire was so ingrained in her memories that she simply couldn't paint a life without it. This life was a little bit different from the life that she knew, making it more believable. Her family was alive, and only painted Alysia was to blame for her own actions, and she would be the one to endure her punishment for defying her mother. So Aline gave her the scars from the fire and took her voice, marking her with anger and blame. Renoir would also be the target of Aline's anger, but he would also be forced to inherit the grief of losing Verso, which wasn't necessary. It was just an act of cruelness. Because painted Renoir's son, painted Verso, couldn't and hadn't died. Aline just wanted painted Renoir to suffer for not being there. And painted Renoir knew this. Knew that he would be the one to carry the resentment that Aline had towards the real Renoir. Her feelings towards her real family came through in her painted replacements. Her feelings too strong to be erased, and thus her own feelings here would haunt the very people she painted to escape those feelings in the first place. But she tried. She tried to recreate Lumiere and a whole other life for her to escape in. Lumiere would be painted in Verso's image, just like everything else, with statues of him both being at the heart of the city and at the entrance gates. This city was for him. For a time, they were somewhat happy, living their lives in Lumiere and in the manor. For a time, Aline was content with her painted family. But when Aline refused to leave, the real Renoir stepped in. Aline refused, and the two began battling over the chroma inside the painting, trying to best the other. Tensions rose until the fracture happened, and they created the monolith, splitting Lumiere in two and changing the canvas world entirely. Painted Verso and painted Renoir were in Lumiere at the time of the fracture, but Aline was nowhere to be found. So they created the first expedition as a search and rescue mission to be able to find their loved ones and to find Aline. But before they found Aline, who was now within the monolith, surrounded by the barrier, real Clea met them at the barrier border and told painted Verso and painted Renoir the truth of their existence and creation. When they refused to leave like Clea told them, she tried to kill them herself, but being immortal, the painted family survived. When Expedition Zero didn't return when they were supposed to, a second search and rescue team was sent after them. This team would include Julie, Verso's lover. They found Verso and Renoir, the only remaining survivors, and during a fight, a blast killed Verso. At least it should have. He would be cut in half, and Julie would watch as this happened. Verso tried to lie and cover it up, but Julie wasn't buying it. Already suspicious of Verso and Renoir after they were the only survivors of Expedition Zero, Julie would no longer believe Verso and his lies. Instead, she and the rest of the team would abduct Verso and would interrogate him. Verso, desperate to protect his family, would kill Julie and the rest of the search and rescue team. Clea would also take her painted copy and paint over her, erasing her mother's depiction of her. She would also take Simon, painted Clea's lover, and brainwash him by pretending to be painted Clea. She then gave Simon powers to breach the monolith to destroy Alen, and also to kill the axon that her father had created of her. Simon was successful in taking down the Hauler, but when Simon met Alen, she also used him and manipulated him to go after Renoir, telling Simon her side of the story, of how she had been fighting Renoir, who she had trapped under the monolith, and that by defeating him, Simon could help save painted Clea, who he now knew had been taken by the real Clea. In doing so, she sent Simon to his death. She manipulated him and used him against Renoir, when Simon simply didn't stand a chance. After being sealed in the abyss by Renoir, Simon would lose his mind, and Alen and Clea would lose their pawn. Clea telling painted Renoir and painted Verso the truth was really the catalyst for the painted family falling apart. Clea would die, and afterwards Verso wouldn't be the same, and he would also drift apart from his family. The expeditions would now go after the Paintress every year, leaving Renoir now having to fight the expeditions to keep them away from Alen. And so Alen's painted family fell apart, just like her real one. When Alysia enters the canvas, Alen would be so lost in her grief at this point that she would not recognize her own daughter, and would instead paint her as just another citizen of Lumiere. This shows how far gone she was, but also how maybe the thought of Alysia entering the canvas didn't even cross her mind. There's also something very ironic about how Alen did not recognize her daughter, so she accidentally paints over her and gives her this new life with parents who cherish her. Alysia would live for several years in Alen's Lumiere, with her new parents that loved her dearly. But here she would become an orphan thanks to the gommage. Even in this world, her parents would be the reason for Alysia's suffering, maybe even mirroring her experience in the real world. Alysia wasn't an orphan, but it doesn't seem like she was given the proper support from her mother. And we also know that after Verso's death, she was essentially alone. It's ironic and sad that in the canvas she would end up alone all over again. In the second meeting where Alysia meets painted Renoir, he pushes Maëlle out of her body, and I think he's trying to eject her from the canvas. This triggers a conversation, and we hear Alen and Renoir talk about Alysia joining the canvas. I think this is the moment they both realize that Alysia is here. Alen is confused as to how Alysia even got here, saying that she's too weak for this, and she blames Renoir for her being inside the canvas. Renoir says, "You only care when things are right in front of you." And honestly, I think this is Renoir seeing an opportunity. How his 67 years going against Alen has not been working. But here with Alysia now inside the canvas, and Alen seeing her daughter, he hopes that it will help her see the truth. We also see a moment of clarity for Alen, a woman who has really begun to go mad. But I also think this small moment reveals a lot about Alen, and it portrays her in a negative light as a mother. From her behavior and hyperfixation with Verso, I see Alen as someone who fixates and focuses on singular tasks. Her dedication to her work emphasizes this. We already know that she was colder than maybe a mother should be, as evident with her interactions with Alysia. But with this small revelation about Alen, she seems to be the type of mother who maybe didn't give her children the proper attention that they needed. Maybe her immense feeling of grief is regret at not being in Verso's life enough. Maybe that's a stretch, but telling your wife and mother of your children that she doesn't see anything except when it's right in front of her. When you're referring to your daughter, who has been in the same world as you for 16 years after you painted over her because you didn't recognize her, is very telling. She seems to know Alysia well enough to know that she is in a weakened state, so she does seem to care. Or maybe she's saying this to manipulate Renoir into believing that Alysia truly isn't strong enough to be here, so he'll make her leave. I also think that in this moment, Alen is severely underestimating her daughter. She thinks that Alysia is weak and that she can't handle being inside the canvas. And everything that we know about Alysia, who becomes Mael, tells us otherwise. She endures so many hardships because of everything that her mother and father have done inside the painting. It's quite ironic that Alen says that she is so weak, and yet she makes her endure this hard life. But also it seems like this wasn't enough to snap Alen out of her situation. She doesn't care enough that her creations are affecting her family to stop. Alen also doesn't show softness directly to Alysia like Renoir does. She doesn't even acknowledge her. Renoir comforts Alysia while Alen says nothing to her, and only tells Renoir to go home. She doesn't want her real family within the canvas, so that she can continue playing pretend. And this is the first time that we're seeing Alen intentionally ignore Alysia. Clea says that this canvas is like a drug to Alen. She says Alen would rather lose herself in make-believe than face reality. It's a drug she's unwilling to resist. And I think her family being here kind of ruins that illusion. I think this sums up Alen very well. Addiction is all-consuming. It's also all-destroying. Addicts will destroy their relationships, their families, and themselves to chase after their addiction. Alen escaping into the canvas is just that. She's chasing the addiction of Verso being alive and running from his death and her grief. It is the ultimate form of denial. It's also why everything around her is being destroyed. She's destroying the canvas, she's destroying her painted and real families, and she's destroying herself. She can't see outside her endless pursuit. Even after Verso finds out the truth and begins to distance himself from his painted family, Alen is still fighting for this life that she created here, even though it's so far removed from her idealized version. Lumiere is destroyed in the end. Verso is gone because he knows the truth. Renoir and Alysia also aren't with her at the top of the monolith. And Renoir is busy fighting the expeditions to keep her safe. Even Alysia wants to end this when she meets Mael. All of her painted family members die until only Verso is left, and Alen's pursuit is still unchanged. She's lost the family that she was fighting for, but she's so far gone that it doesn't really even matter. It's not about the things that she has here. It's about the things that she doesn't have here. Because here she doesn't have to face the grief and real loss of Verso. She's so far gone and consumed by her emotions that the first time we actually see her in the manor in Old Lumiere, she is unresponsive to seeing her own daughter. She even has no reaction to seeing Verso. Her painted family has taken the role of protecting Alen, while receiving nothing in return. Something I think the real family did as well, especially Renoir. Painted Alysia loves her mother despite being painted with Alen's resentment and anger. Painted Renoir protects Alen despite knowing the truth. Even when Verso knew the truth for a while, he joined the expeditions to try to save Alen too. Their lives revolve around Alen, and they do genuinely love her. But I do wonder how much of these traits are from being painted to be this way. Even Verso, her best work yet, someone who was able to distance himself from her, does make his final decision for Alen. Maybe not solely, but seeing the real Alen outside the real world definitely sways Verso. The entire painted family loves her and will do anything for her. Verso, in the end, will even want to die if it means that she will be okay. It's rather sad when you take into the context that she's essentially used and abused them. I also wonder how this version of the Paintress here exists. Is this just a small piece of her, the heart of the Paintress as Verso calls it, within the manor? Or did she leave the top of the monolith to be here with her painted family? There's so much that is unexplained about how the painters work and how their powers work, but whatever the case, there's part of Alen that is here in this version of the manor. But it isn't until we get to the top of the monolith where we see the real Alen, the real Paintress. But first, we meet her own depiction of herself, those that Lumiere considered the Paintress, her wooden puppet. Her puppet is black and white and empty and heartbroken. It's also interesting that while Renoir was painting mirrors of his families with the axons, Alen ended up painting herself. It's probably the most honest she's been with how she feels, and I bet she doesn't even recognize that. It's also interesting that the one depiction of herself is far removed from her hyper-realistic style. I wonder if it's because this was too uncomfortable. She was uncomfortable painting something that she related to so much. I wonder if it also kept her from finishing it, instead leaving it black and white and unfinished, similar to how she painted Alysia. She is empty, devoid of emotions, and her design really showcases this. When we look at her, there's a huge gaping hole in her chest. Her heart is missing. She's incomplete and falling apart, and while she tries to sleep, it's restless and not peaceful. She's miserable, mirroring all of the things that Alen is probably feeling. The fight against her is just sad. She's invulnerable to any damage or pain we inflict, and she has no reactions. I think this is just because nothing else could hurt Alen more than she has already been hurt. In the very beginning of the game, Sophie, who thinks this wooden puppet is the Paintress, says, "Look at her. She looks sad. Maybe she's a prisoner too, stuck in the same cycle with us." Even Sophie sees the truth. And this is exactly true. Alen is stuck in the cycle of grief. Her denial, her depression, her isolation, and her emptiness are all part of a cycle that she continues. There are all of these elements of Alen and her suffering that are so unbearably sad. But then there's also this element of anger that has taken over Alen, another part of her cycle that she continues to exist within. And her puppet also reflects this. But the puppet is nothing more than that, something Alen uses, similar to how she uses Simon and her painted family and the people of Lumiere. I don't think that Alen actually really cared about the people of Lumiere in the way that she should have. There are some journals from past expeditions where they talk about how the Painters' Council is kind of a pain in the ass. It sounds like they want to rebel against it. So it's very clear that even in this world there were still problems. And with Alen being in control of everything, you'd think that those problems wouldn't exist. If anything though, I think that just means that those problems probably mirror what happens in the real world with her as well. I think that she uses people. It's also ironic that in this world where she has created all of these people to use, she also created a version of herself to use. When we finally meet the actual Paintress, it's this moment that shows Alen's darker side. This is the second time that the Paintress has seen Alysia as Mael, but this time it's different. This time it's the real Paintress on top of the monolith, and instead of having no reaction like at the manor, she has a visceral response. It's really like an impulse, something that happens so quickly that she doesn't even think about it. Her feelings towards her daughter are so strong that when she realizes who she is looking at, she sets Alysia on fire, starting with her face. Lune and Ciel's faces are also set on fire, but only after Mael's, and Verso is the only one unaffected. She only stops the fire when Verso intervenes, which he most likely knew would be the only way to make her stop. It's very intentional on how it spreads and who it affects first. It's sad because it kind of seems like she's even afraid of Alysia. So maybe her first response is to protect herself. But we can really see the cruelty and malice that has come from Aleen's resentment and anger here in this moment, with how she treats Mael. Her motherly instincts don't take over and don't make her stop hurting her own daughter. But instead we see the anger that she has. She wants Alysia to suffer the same way that both Verso and Aleen are suffering from the fire that she created. It's extremely cruel, and it also shows us how lost Aleen truly is. Entering the monolith shows us who Aleen used to be. All the flashbacks of her children and her show Aleen teaching them how to paint and following in her footsteps. But it also shows her teaching Verso how to play her piano, and we see moments of conflict between her and Renoir, and then her and Alysia. We don't know exactly when these flashbacks are from, but it seems to show that Aleen has a lot of anger already. The way she gestures at Alysia is very stern. We know that Alysia didn't have the painter skills that her mother expected of her, and we can also infer from the story that she most likely didn't want to be a painter and wanted to be a writer instead. But whatever the case, Aleen was already upset with her. She was also upset with Renoir, and maybe even before Verso's death. The final memory before meeting Painted Renoir is of Aleen and Renoir together, maybe long before the events of Verso's death even happened. Because from what we know between these two and Renoir's depiction of Aleen in Seren, and Aleen's comments to Renoir, the two hadn't been close in a long time. So long that Aleen wasn't even wearing her wedding ring. We're seeing all of these memories and all of these painful moments, but why choose these memories? Are these regrets, or are these things that fueled her anger? Are these only the moments she still remembers after becoming the Paintress? Is this all that's left of her? Because the woman that we meet at the top of the monolith is no longer Aleen. Her story is the depiction of how grief can consume us entirely, overshadowing the person that we were. Aleen's journey becoming the Paintress is about losing herself completely. She knows what she is doing is wrong. She knows the cost of remaining here, and yet the fantasy of her son and life here took over, and her grief became all-consuming, that it made all those things not matter. She went from being someone level-headed and pragmatic to someone who loses all sense of control. All those boundaries and lines that she had set were lost. We know the things we are addicted to are bad, and yet the addiction overpowers sensibility, because that's what addiction does. It changes you into someone else. At this point, she doesn't even recognize her own creations, and in the final confrontation with her, she stands against Verso. The final battle with Verso is the culmination of Aleen's madness and irony. In her desperate attempt to save Verso and hold on to this piece of him, she has destroyed the world that he created and all the creations that he loved. She destroyed her own painted family, and as far as Verso, she has destroyed him as a person. And now she's about to destroy the very version of her son that she painted. Aleen has genuinely lost her mind, so lost in her grief and depression that she does not know where she is or whether she dreamed Verso's death. She's lost in between the painted and real world. Her reaching out to Verso is her trying to ground herself with what she knows. But with how far her madness has gone, she thinks he is a trick by Renoir, that everyone is a trick by Renoir, which he has probably done to her in the past, tricked her with his own paintings. Aleen refuses to believe that it's Verso, not recognizing her own work, just as she didn't recognize Alysia when she entered the canvas. When Verso tells her that Verso is dead, she becomes enraged. The truth upsets her. We see the anger she has for Renoir and how desperate she is to hold on to the canvas. And her words reveal how she truly feels. It's only to Verso that her words are not cutting. She says to him, "How cruel of your father to use you like this." She is extremely mad at Renoir. She says, "Renoir gets to grieve however he likes, but I get to grieve my own way. Tell your father I do not need him to look out for me. Arrogant man, I taught him to paint, and he seeks to use my creations against me? Again, we see her anger at Renoir and her hostility towards what he's doing. The irony here is that it's Alen who was the one who started this entire journey by using her son's painting and the painted version of her son. She is the master manipulator, and yet she points fingers at Renoir for the very things that she is doing. He too is guilty of manipulation, as we saw with him as the curator, but all of this is happening because of Alen. It's quite ironic. She is also resentful at him for being able to grieve however he wants, and probably feels like he's trying to control her. Because, he is. At this point, he has to get Alen to stop, but she's fighting him at every turn. She even says, "I am not crazy, I know what I'm doing," right after asking if she simply dreamed that Verso died. She has no grip on reality, which is fitting considering one of her attacks is that she rips the very fabric of reality. She's coming undone in this fight, saying how she really feels, but also losing any remaining tethers she had to reality. She even has different lines for the expeditioners in this fight, even one for Minoko. But her two for Mayel are, "Do you see what you've done? You've killed him." And, "Foolish child, you defied me and now he's dead." She's saying how she truly feels. She genuinely blames Alysia for the death of Verso. We already knew this, but now she's saying it directly to her daughter. And her anger can't be hidden. I wonder if she ever said this in the real world to Alysia directly, or if she kept it inside, and this is the first time that she's actually said it. It's rather sad how much blame she puts on Alysia, and it's probably for the best that Mayel didn't have her memories as Alysia yet. This must have really hurt to hear. Her line to Minoko is, "Minoko, even you? You can't betray Verso like this." She knows that Minoko was his real best friend, and she knows that Minoko knows what he is doing. She's trying to manipulate him to stop, but I also think she's genuinely confused. She also has a line for Ciel and Lune, and she says, "Who are you supposed to be? No matter." And I think this answers the question of Alen creating the people of Lumiere and how much they actually mattered to her. Yes, she's far gone here, but I think her not recognizing them is because she put little thought into creating them in the first place. They were simply backdrops to her life with Verso and her escape in the canvas and nothing more. Her wanting to protect them and save them from the gommage was just her holding onto the life that she created here, and that's it. After giving everyone a piece of her mind, the Paintress then summons her puppet. When the phase transitions and Mayel tries to walk towards Alen, Alen has an immediate reaction. She screams. It reminds me of that one moment when she just had a visceral reaction to seeing her daughter, so she set her on fire. Once again, that impulse to react takes over. Is it anger? Is it fear? When the fight is almost over, she shields and heals her creations, the expeditioners, as a last way to protect her creations and to save the canvas. She uses her last bit of energy to try to preserve the thing that she cares about the most, Verso's canvas. I think in this moment, she's doing the only thing that she knows how to do at this point, even though the canvas isn't the same canvas that she fought so hard to keep in the first place. Her creations are trying to kill her. Her family has fallen apart, and Verso is fighting her here and now. But she doesn't have anything else to fight for. This is it. When she is finally defeated, she doesn't understand why Verso helped destroy her. Mayel feels compelled to comfort her, and with Verso's help, she does. I think in this moment, Alen maybe finally recognizes her daughter and maybe regrets how much anger she has. But it's too late because she is forced out of the canvas. Renoir gets all of her chroma and begins his gommage. Unfortunately, Renoir is proven right. And Alen does find the canvas in Alysia's hiding spot, very shortly after being ejected. So just as he feared, she risked her life to return. These final moments with Alen are the truest depictions of who she is, of who she's become. Her anger, her suffering, and her desperation. Her song, Alen, reflects this. As she re-enters the canvas, the lyrics are either from the perspective of herself or Renoir, begging her to leave this cursed painting, to leave this canvas of a fake life. It's the chain of her freedom, and the lyrics are begging her to break free. The song is angry and emotional, and it's the reality of Alen. She is chained to this cursed painting. This moment also proves that everything that Renoir was fighting for was true. Alen would do anything to find the canvas again, and she found it wherever Alysia hid it. She, without a doubt, would continue to return to fight for the canvas, and she would stop at nothing, even if that meant dying. Clea was right. Renoir was right. During Painted Renoir and Real Renoir's confrontation, Painted Renoir tells the real Renoir that destroying it won't bring your wife back. Because yes, Alen is far gone. Of course, he's trying to appease Renoir not to destroy the canvas, but I think he also genuinely recognizes how far gone she truly is. When she returns, Alen is even more angry, directing her anger at Renoir once again, but also at her daughter. Her anger is palpable, and so is her avoidance of Maëlle. She looks at her for a split second, and then very intentionally looks away. She does not respond to what Maëlle says. If anything, this just proves that all the resentment that Alen has for her daughter is still there. Creating this life, escaping into the canvas, and becoming the Paintress changed nothing. She still cannot look at her daughter, and leaving the canvas won't fix this. I think this also proves that her mental state isn't different whether she's in the canvas or not. She feels the same inside and out, which she probably realized once being ejected, that her time inside the painting really meant nothing. She claimed to be grieving, but she was just running, which is why she runs back to the canvas. The chroma around her and her petals and everything around her is also in black and white, reflecting how Alen just sucks the life out of everything. Her depression is black and white. Her anger is black and white. And she makes everything around her suffer that same fate. I think Alen is too weak to both hold her form here and also her puppet. So I think she uses all of her energy to put into the puppet instead, who she uses immediately to destroy Seren, the painting of Alen that Renoir created, the one that Alen probably saw in the Italier. By her reaction and intent, it's very clear she knows that Seren is supposed to be her. From here, we can see the real dynamic between Renoir and the real Alen, how their relationship was crumbling. They're both mad. Renoir says, "How can you be this selfish, Alen? Put aside the canvas, it's killing you both." We also see how Renoir is holding onto the Alen that he knew, the one who taught him all these lessons about painting and what it costs to be here. When Alen's puppet reaches out to him, it's similar to how the puppet reaches out to Seren, but it lacks the same anger. Instead, it's timid. Was she going to try and attack him, or was she trying to reach out as an act of love? Whichever it is, Renoir erases her puppet. He then shows us the real Alen in the real world, how her sickness is taking her. She's coughing, suffering, and dying. She is a lifeless corpse waiting to die, desperate to re-enter the canvas. This is the truth of the woman behind the Paintress. A sad, depressed, angry, empty woman, desperate to find joy and something to hold on to of her dead son. She is a mother grieving. She's destructive and cruel, and also has so much love inside of her that it's eating her alive. Grief is a powerful feeling. It can destroy us just like it destroyed Alen. But where does this story take her? Can this family be saved? Can they recover from this? Can they move forward? Alysia is the source of Alen's rage. We know Alysia defied her mother regarding the writers, and in doing so was the catalyst to her brother dying. And at every possible turn, Alen shows Alysia how angry she is. Even in her painted version of her life, she didn't make the fire not happen. She simply gave Alysia all of the trauma, the pain and suffering of the burns, of the scars and the loss of her voice, the memories. Here she would make her daughter suffer for what she had done. Can Alysia and Alen ever mend their relationship? I think even in Verso's ending, we truly don't know. She doesn't make eye contact with Alysia, she doesn't comfort her, she doesn't show any hint of forgiveness. Even in the ending when she sees Alysia with her healed face as Mael, she looks for a brief moment and then makes the very conscious choice to look away and ignore her daughter. She does not respond. It's cruelty after cruelty towards Alysia in both the canvas and real world. And I genuinely don't know if Alen can ever let it go. Their relationship already seemed strained before the fire, and it only worsened afterwards. As Alen's journal states, she can't stand to look at Alysia's burned face. It reminds her of the fire, of Verso's death, and her pain. Alen may be seeking Renoir's comfort in the end, but her healing process has not even really begun. And with the type of person that Alen is, I wouldn't be surprised if her and Alysia's relationship stays forever strained. I also think that it's a bit taboo to ask this, considering parents are supposed to love their children no matter what. But how do you move on from something like this as Alen? How do you know that while it wasn't actually Alysia's fault, she unintentionally played a part in your son's death? How, as a mother, do you grapple with that? I'm not a parent, so I think it's easy to wave it off and say she should love her daughter no matter what. And yes, she should. But genuinely, how do you move on from someone you love being a major part in why you also feel so much pain? That must be so hard, and I genuinely don't know if Alen can move forward. I will say though that Alen and Alysia's relationship and dynamic is seeped in irony. Because of Alen entering the canvas and staying, Alysia would follow in her mother's footsteps. So much so that she could even become the next Paintress. And on the opposite of this, in her quest to make Alysia suffer, she also gave Alysia the one thing she seemed to desperately want, to be a writer. The letter we get from Painted Alysia in Act 2 is absolutely beautiful and heartbreaking, and it shows the truth of Alysia and her talents. She wanted to be a writer, and she was very good at it. Her mother may have painted her out of anger and resentment in this light, but she also painted the truth of Alysia. This would also be the case for Painted Renoir. After meeting Painted Renoir several times and seeing his cold, calculating methods, once Alysia finally gets her memories back, she tells us that her papa isn't as mean as her mama painted him to be. But Alysia is faced with the truth when he is in fact still as cold and mean as her mother depicted him to be. Yes, it's out of love, but this has to reflect his real-world behavior. Granted, his so-called mean behavior is just Renoir doing everything in his power to save his wife and family. But he is very controlling, he is overbearing, which is the truth for both Renoirs. Again, Alen paints her family in their true lights. They are all painted in some truth, but also in something that Alen needs from them. For Painted Renoir, Alen needed someone to protect her, the same way that real Renoir did as well. He is constantly sent to kill expeditioners who reach the continent, and he's also trying to keep his family together and making sure that all the chroma goes back to her. He's also trying to appeal to Verso to rebuild their family and be together. He's trying to hide Alysia from the truth and trying to protect the Paintress from being erased. Just like in the real world, and just like in the painted world, they both exist for their families and for Alen. It's ironic that Alen painted Renoir to be this way. She could have not painted him at all if she wanted to. Or she could have painted him in her idealized version, different from the Renoir that she was growing resentful towards. But instead, she painted him with the same purpose and the same dedication to her. The same dedication that she is so angry at him for having. And I think that's because Alen knows Renoir will always be there. Even in Verso's ending, Renoir is there desperate for Alen. Desperate for her touch, her comfort, and her love. Even after everything that she did to her family and to him. Even after 67 years of being trapped. Unlike Alysia, whose relationship with her mother is forever changed, for Renoir, it's different. Their relationship stays the same. That cycle that Clea spoke of them being stuck in, continues. Renoir will forgive her, and Alen will continue to do whatever she wants. I imagine Clea's relationship with her mother will be somewhere in between. She will have expected her mother to get lost in the painting. As she says, what Alen is doing is like a drug. Maybe she sees this as a lesson for her not to follow in her mother's footsteps. I think the situation will harden Clea even more. But I also think she's sad and resentful at her mother for destroying Verso's world and all of her childhood memories with him inside the canvas. The Lady of Sap reinforces this. Clea will be more resentful, and she'll most likely keep it to herself, not seeing a point in telling her family how she feels, because it won't change anything. But I think this entire situation reinforced for Clea that she can only rely on herself. So while I see her being more of herself, closed off, independent, and self-sufficient, I also see her leaning more into those traits after everything that happened. Just more resentment within the Desandre family. For Verso was only alive in one ending. Mael's new painted, older version of him in the idealized picture of the future that Mael had. Alysia has become the Paintress. But I think in this ending, we know that based on Alen's actions, she would once again find the painting and try to return. Even with Renoir leaving the canvas to go be with her in the real world, I truly think she would find a way to return, especially if she knew what Alysia had done. Maybe she would even want to return, if she knew that there was a Verso inside the canvas that could have been his future. Or maybe Alysia turning into the Paintress would actually make Alen realize what she had been doing all this time. Maybe it would be a wake-up call and a mirror, making her realize that her daughter would eventually end up killing herself if she stayed in the canvas. And then maybe she'd have to step into Renoir's shoes. She would have to be the one to try and make Alysia leave. Or maybe her daughter being gone and the evidence of Verso's death on her face would give Alen the opportunity to not have to face her resentment and anger towards Alysia. Maybe she would be happy to see her gone within the painting. There's so much unknown about the endings, and I think that is part of the point. It's the uncertainty of life. We don't know what's going to happen because neither do the Desandres. But for Alen, the end is just the beginning. The hardest part about depression is crawling out of the black hole, because it doesn't really matter how many people who love you extend their hand to help. You have to be the one to take it. That's where Alen is at. Can she move on from this? Can she see what she's done to her family? Can she see what they're doing for her? Can the Desandre family recover from this? We don't know, but we hope. That's what the ending is about. If you choose Verso's ending, which is really where we see a tiny glimpse into Alen's future, it's uncertain, and it's probably going to be extremely painful. But hopefully, her and her family can move forward. Clair Obscur is about how and why we engage with art, which is what the Desandre family is really about. They're all using art to understand and feel this terrible experience. The emotions and vulnerabilities displayed by the Desandre family inside the canvas versus outside is very different. Inside the canvas, they can express how they truly feel, even if not directly. The Lady of Sap, the remnants of the family members, the axons, the painted copies, they're all expressions about something about the painter, which is the point of art. Art at its core is self-expression. It's a vulnerable connection with something that makes us us. For the Dandre family, all the things they were suppressing and running from are on full display in the canvas. Clea's vulnerability and anger at her parents, Aleen's resentment towards Renoir and Alysia, Alysia's desire to be someone else and to be free, Renoir's desperation to save his family. Here they can explore how they feel through their art, while also using it to understand those feelings. They can express something they aren't free to do in the real world, and let their emotions run wild. Which is also ultimately the problem. We have a family running from their problems, abandoning each other and letting their family fall apart because of it. They are all part of the problem, and the canvas is just making it so much worse, but also, in a way, better. Because art is about how you use it. They're feeling so much here and hurting each other with their truths, but they're also getting to explore and express how they feel. It's a double-edged sword. By the end of the story, you just hope that the Dandres see a bit of what we see as the player so that they can move on. Aleen especially. Aleen's story seems cruel and cold on the outside, but I think when we put ourselves in her shoes and really think about losing the person that we love the most, how that would change us, it's hard not to understand how she ended up as the Paintress, lost in her grief. Love and loss are so powerful and all-consuming that we don't truly know how we'll handle it until we actually experience it, which I'm sure is exactly what Aleen realized. Aleen's story isn't unbelievable or far-fetched. It happens every day. People lose the ones they love, and then they lose themselves because of it. It's extremely sad. And maybe if Aleen had more support, maybe if Renoir had been there for her more, or maybe if she didn't have the canvas in the first place, she could have had a better chance at making it to the other side of her grief. But we're just human. There's no right or wrong way to feel. There's no manual on how to grieve. We just try and hope, and sometimes we fail. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is so sincere in its explorations of mental health because it explores very real facets of the human experience. Aleen's experience is real, and so is every other person inside the story, because we all grieve differently and we are all just human. This game is about the human experience, and it's why we connect with it, because it's relatable. Every character is relatable, because every character is a deep dive into their psychology. Whether it's the psychology of love, anger, depression, suicide, or grief. There's so many facets to every character, and while Aleen did some very horrible things, I also still see the woman that Renoir sees underneath. I still see the grieving woman who was suffering so much that this is who she became. I see a woman with deep love for her family, even if it doesn't always show. Because isn't that what grief is? The love that we have for someone with nowhere to go? The Dandre family encompasses humanity and every complicated facet of our emotions and existence. Clair Obscur, light, dark, revealed and hidden, all the parts of us. I haven't experienced a game like this in a very long time, where it really explores the psyche on a deeper level with its hidden secrets and meanings that you really have to deep dive into to understand and find. And I'm just so thankful that this game exists. It's art, it's human, it's beautiful, and I love it. I even love Aleen, even if she's kind of also terrible. If you haven't watched my video on Seren, which really breaks down the relationship and dynamic between Renoir and Aleen, then here it is. It provides some more context into who she is, but also how Renoir feels as well. The fracture changed the entire world. Lives were lost, Lumiere was split in two, and the mysterious monolith was created. Here, a husband and wife stood at odds, a desperate husband trapped beneath, and a grieving wife above. This family stuck in the cycle of grief would change life for everyone, but especially for themselves. Their standstill would last for 67 years, and during that time they both painted different versions of their family. Alen with her painted copies and Renoir with his axons. For Renoir, he painted the axons and their respective islands as a way to remember his family during his imprisonment, but also as a way to understand them. The Hauler is Clea, the Reacher is Alysia, the Maskkeeper is Verso, and Seren is Alen. They are representations of who they are, how he sees them, and how he sees his own dynamic with them. But they also seem to be lessons or mirrors to depict the things about them that they don't see. Hidden within every aspect of their design, their environments, and their music are stories of the truth. Here is Seren and her hidden meanings. Seren's island is beautiful. It's serene, it's magical, and it's all built to showcase the beauty of Seren. But at the same time, it's wall after wall, and Seren is at the bottom, enclosed by the many walls that surround her, tethered in place by her beautiful dress. A dress made of the same fabric that matches the one we find hanging on the wall inside the manor. Even inside this canvas, even after their fighting and the fracture, even after being imprisoned by his own wife, Renoir still remembers her favorite fabrics enough to recreate them in this version of her. They're beautiful, but here she stands, a dancer with no legs and no freedom, weighed down by her fabrics and trapped in place by the walls and destruction that surrounds her. Verso says that past expeditions have been tearing down all the walls, which has left the building broken and falling apart. But I think it also symbolizes something greater. Alen is someone who is enclosed by walls, endless walls that you have to break to get to the person within. And from everything we know about Renoir and Alen's relationship, she was beginning to build more walls. She was beginning to pull away from him, and he didn't realize it or see it, or maybe he just didn't want to admit it, but the walls were growing, and that's what I see here with her island. It's beautiful and massive, and it's all the walls that Renoir feels between him and the woman that he loves, and who she used to be. The axon is Renoir's story of his wife through his eyes, his wife that was pulling away. This island and Seren herself may be beautiful and grand, but there's a sadder story about Renoir and Alen's failing marriage hidden underneath. The creation of Seren is Renoir trying to understand the things he couldn't see outside the canvas. He says the process helps him make sense of the chaos. The process moves him, allowing him to shape and mold a composition, to understand and create order, to tame the chaos and create something unique to him. He sees his paintings as proof that he has not surrendered to the despair, unlike his wife. He also says that him and Alen used to be the same, but somehow, somewhere, she changed. Seren is Renoir, trying to understand that change, and how him and Alen became so different. Alen is a very skilled painter, so skilled that she even became the head of the Painters' Council. But it wasn't just painting that was her passion. She loved creating any type of art. We don't know a lot about Alen and her life outside the canvas, but we know she lived for the process of creation more so than the product. Renoir says they both shared this aspect of capturing the essence of an idea. Alen loved to create. She was also a dancer and loved music. And Maëlle says that Seren's dance is familiar, because it's probably one that she saw her mother dance growing up. Alen has always been full of wonder and creativity, but Renoir says that somewhere, somehow, she changed. She no longer cares for the act of painting, only what her painting can achieve. I think Seren is Renoir painting his wife as both how she used to be, but also how she became. It's both how she changed without him realizing, and it's also how the grief changed her. Alongside this, I think Renoir is also painting why he fell in love with her in the first place. Her dancing, her connection with music, her painting and passion for art all seduced Renoir under her spell. These are the things that he fell in love with. Seren's song can be translated a few ways, but based on what I could find, it's essentially a love poem, but a sad one. Seren chained, noble grieving queen. She reigns deaf world in her satin ebony dress. She rumbles, she destroys, devastated, and cries foul cruelty of the soul. In strength and pain she devours, nightmare and terror, an unleashed thunder, grieving world. This is mostly Google Translate, so it could be somewhat wrong, but I think the lyrics sound exactly what I'd expect from a song that sounds both beautiful and sad. She's crying, but she's destroying. She's a queen, but she's chained. She's two things at once, beautiful and dangerous, both to herself and others. We know that people have died just looking at Seren. Expeditions have succumbed to her melody and died because of it. Her power is overwhelming and all-consuming. This is how Renoir sees Alen. A beautiful, hypnotic woman, so full of wonder, beauty, and creativity, but she's also trapped, dangerous, destructive, and manipulative. Some may see this depiction of his wife as cruel, but I think it's just real. Renoir uses his painting to understand, and that's what he's doing with Seren. He's understanding the woman that he loves, that is so lost in her grief that she's hurting everyone, including herself, but also including him. This is a love poem to the person that Alen became and how he recognizes her grief and anger and sees the things he couldn't see before. Robe Deour is, I think, about the woman Renoir fell in love with. It's about her calmness, her perfect movement, ballet enchanted by grace and beauty, in her dress of love. This is a happier song to who Alen used to be, how skilled she was and how much her essence pulled Renoir in. This is a love song to who she used to be and who he still sees under everything she has become. There's two other songs that play on this island. Tessier's theme, which is fully instrumental, and then there is also Rouge d'Iris, Iris's Red. This one plays during the fight with Tessier, and while the interpretation is a bit confusing and vague, and I think this could be interpreted two different ways. Renoir calling out to Alen and speaking of the limitless lengths he will go to for her. For her, Seren will break reality. It's rather sad when you put the song together with this being Renoir's depiction of himself. Tessier is fighting to protect Seren and will do anything for her, even die because of it. On the other hand, this could also be about Seren and Alen, shattering what is real. The petals, the gentleness of her soul, is now enchanted by Iris's red. Either way you look at it, it paints Seren being lost. The gentleness that Renoir knew is gone. All of the songs on this island add to the story of Renoir falling in love with this beautiful woman, but then his wife becomes someone else while he didn't realize it. She slowly pulls away from him, and then the loss of their son breaks her, turning her from a gentle, calm, sweet woman into this angry, destructive stranger who he still loves. He's trying to find the woman that he knew underneath all of this, and he's willing to die to do it. That is the power of Seren and the power of Alen over Renoir. The music makes you feel all of those emotions, but there's something more important to the songs than their lyrics and their meanings, their intent. All of Seren's songs are manipulating, they're serenading. They're part of Seren's siren song. Minoko says that what she really does is play with your head. Everything about her is alluring and tantalizing and hard to resist. Her song is powerful. Coupled with her dance and appearance, it's hard not to give in. But the reality of what she's doing is manipulation. I think this shows how Renoir felt so hypnotized by Alen that he would do literally anything for her, and how he felt manipulated by this. Maybe he's feeling this way towards his own feelings and how his love overwhelmed him. Or maybe he felt like Alen was actually manipulating him. But regardless of where the manipulation stems from, the message is clear. Falling under Alen, Seren's spell is dangerous. This is the part of Seren that is the lesson. To not give in to the wonder, to not fall under her spell. This is also reflected in the nevrons that Renoir painted on the island. The glissandos, which are named after a music technique, also resemble snakes. The glissandos have rattlesnake tails, which is usually used to scare prey away. But for these glissandos, they also have the ability to enchant, just like Seren. The ballet dancers that also dance to Seren's song also have the ability to enchant, again just like Seren. Everything here is enchanting, just like Alen. Her dance, the environment, the music, it starts to make everyone lose themselves. Ciel starts dancing, Lune leans into the feeling, Maëlle is confused, and Verso tries to fight it. But even Monoko gives in eventually. She is manipulating their emotions by making everyone feel hers. Something past expeditioners have also felt. Expedition 76 died to Seren's melody. One of them said what they were experiencing was empathic distress. They were feeling Seren's emotional state through her song, and they were feeling distress because of it. On the surface, she doesn't seem sad or lost in her grief. Instead, Seren looks peaceful, dancing to her melody. You'd only know she was in distress by feeling what she feels. She is successful in hiding her true feelings, which is probably why Renoir didn't see the signs, didn't realize the changes within Alen. You'd only know what Seren feels if she either told you or made you feel exactly what she feels, which is what she does. Alen seems to always make those around her feel her emotions, to the extent that she entered Verso's canvas, painted her dead son, painted an entire city full of painted people to fill her void. Avoiding her grief means that those within the canvas were the actual ones shouldering the weight of Alen's loss. She is consistently making those around her suffer the consequences of her emotions. This is her destructive nature. And we know from Clea's comments, implying her mother and father have done stuff like this before, that this is a recurring thing with Alen. Whatever she is feeling becomes the most important thing, and she makes everyone around her feel it too. I know the things I just said are conflicting. How can she both hide her true feelings while also forcing them on everyone? But I think the answer is simple. I compared Alen to Clea in my last video because I do think they are very similar. Two women surrounded by their own walls, composed, strict, perfectionist, and both of them in control of themselves, but this is where they differ. Alen loses control, while Clea remains in control. Clea is the more successful painter, and I think this could be why. She finds a way to direct her emotions into purpose. Meanwhile, Alen seems to let her emotions consume her. Her journey into the canvas was gradual. There's a bed on the floor near the canvas. I think Alen slept here in between entering the canvas before her grief completely consumed her, and before she refused to leave. Maybe it wasn't originally her plan to stay forever. And maybe Renoir didn't see how much her time within the canvas wasn't actually helping her. But it's this point where her emotions took over completely. And this is also when her grief spilled over and became everyone else's problem. To Alen, only her grief matters. Not her family on the outside, not her family inside, only Verso, the subject of her grief and key to the emptiness in her heart. Nothing else mattered. I think this characteristic of Alen is also represented in the music. Her own music becomes so strong and powerful that she refuses to hear anyone else's. Expedition 55 speaks of how the music within the Colosseum worked. The nevrons were unaffected by sonics, from the expedition augmenting pictos with music. They said, "It's as if they can't hear our music. They just keep dancing to their own." Maybe this represents how Aline refused to hear anyone else's voice other than her own, which I think is pretty apparent by her story, and how she is absolutely unwavering, knowing full well it will cost her her life. Instead of leaving the canvas and addressing her grief in a healthy manner, she discards the entire family and makes them and the people of Lumiere suffer the consequences of her actions and her emotions. She makes painted Alysia wear the scars of her blame. She makes painted Renoir fight to protect her. She makes painted Verso have to live this life in between, forcing him to make horrible decisions. She makes the people of Lumiere suffer for her and Renoir's fighting. Everything is collateral damage. This all could have been prevented, but instead everything must be how Aline wants, and everyone must feel what she feels. This is part of what Renoir painted with Seren. These same actions are mirrored with the expedition. She's manipulating Expedition 33 to yearn for those they've lost, just like her. She lures them in with that sense of wonder and awe, and then she makes them see the ones that they've lost. When first entering the Colosseum, you feel her wonder. The song, the dance, the beauty, it makes them feel what Renoir felt falling in love with her, but by the time you get past her walls and make it to Seren herself, her wonder quickly turns to making everyone feel exactly as she does. She makes them feel the sadness and longing that she has for her dead son. I also think in a way, she's showing them what they could have if they surrendered like she did. This is why Verso is the hardest to trick. He is familiar with her games and has also come to his own conclusions. While he used to entertain Aline's illusions of his painted family, he has separated himself, and that's why he doesn't see anyone when everyone else is being charmed. He doesn't long for anyone anymore, not like Seren does, and not like everyone else does. Instead, he is mad at her deception and her games. He's had enough being a pawn. This interaction between Verso and Seren is really indicative of the dynamic between her and Verso. Aline was playing a game with him, manipulating him and using him for herself. Here, Verso can finally stand against her and not give in. But it's not the same with everybody else. The final battle with Seren is really the culmination of everything we know about Aline. As the fight goes on, Seren becomes more erratic and more violent. Her movements become more rough and angry, and you can see the shift in her entire demeanor. Aline is someone who seems like she experiences strong emotions and keeps them inside until they boil over. I think her fight kind of reflects that. It actually reminds me of the final fight with Renoir, when Aline re-enters the canvas. She is colder and harsher than ever. She immediately destroys Seren because she is angrier than ever. Nothing can change her mind. She does not see anyone else's side or hear anyone else's voice. Life forces cruel choices by making Renoir make these choices for his family when they can't. This is most evident with Aline. Even after being defeated, Seren still doesn't give up, just like Aline. Instead, her song becomes maddening and overpowering. It makes everyone's heads hurt. And I think in her last moment, she tries one final manipulation to appeal to the person she sees the most of herself in, Lunae. Lunae is a musician. We can even see her playing guitar at the beginning of the game. Lunae, like Aline, knows how to create music that enchants others. She shares that same sense of wonder that Aline does, the process of creation and discovery. She loves puzzles and questions. She's always trying to figure people out and unravel their mysteries. Lunae lives to learn. She's also focused, determined, and in control, and she doesn't give up. She is very similar to Aline, which is why Lunae is the one to deliver the final blow. It's also why she can wear the hair and clothing of Seren. The gift is for her because she did what Seren could not. Unlike Alen, who gave in to the wonder and madness of grief, it's Lunae who recognizes they are the same, but she makes another choice. She doesn't give in. This is the lesson of Seren, and the lesson that Renoir imparted. How important it is not to lose yourself, whether it's in someone you love or losing yourself within grief. Lunae doesn't lose herself. If only Alen could have followed in Lunae's footsteps. Seren is a perfect portrait of beauty and grace, and is designed to be mesmerizing, so that we understand how alluring Alen supposedly is, but under it all, I think there's something very sad about her design. Based on the names of the ballet nevrons that Renoir painted, and the music referring to ballet, Seren and Alen are ballet dancers, but Seren can't be. The basis of ballet is its footwork, and while it uses the entire body, the ballet feet are iconic to the dance. Yet Seren has no feet. She can't do any ballet poses, she can't do any real ballet dances. She's beautiful and hypnotizing, but a ballet dancer who can't do actual ballet is rather sad. Instead, she is weighed down by her dress and stuck in place. Everything ballet is not. She's no longer the ballet dancer she once was. Maybe it's simply a design choice and less for the devs to animate, but this is how I interpret Seren's design. She's only half the dancer that she used to be. She still has the design of a dancer with the glamour, the jewels, and the gold, but she also has these 6 chokers on her neck that don't match the gold ornaments of the rest of her design. She is choking, she is suffocating, and I think that's maybe how Renoir saw her. I think before the death of Verso, his wife was dealing with something that made her pull away from him, something that made her walk away in one of the flashbacks of her and Renoir. Something was happening to Alen and he wasn't aware of it, but I think he's depicted it in this version of her, recognizing her own suffering and how she continues to dance and create and shine despite it. Seren is also stuck. The fabric of her dress fills the bottom of the Colosseum and makes her immobile. I think it's sad that she's stuck. It's almost like she's stuck putting on a show and performing. Maybe this represents her constant drive to create no matter what. Maybe it shows another feeling of her feeling trapped that Renoir didn't want to recognize. Maybe it's even Renoir making her stuck with the endless fabric that he sews. Because behind the scenes of Seren's dance and song is a representation of Renoir. He paints himself on every island of the Axons. Whether there was a version of him with Clea's Axon before she was killed is unknown, but Alysia has her little green-haired builder, the Mask Keeper has Visages, and Seren has Tessier. Tessier means weaver, and that's exactly what he's doing, creating the fabrics for Seren's dress. He's essentially sewing the fabrics that are keeping her in place. He's both adorning her with his work and maybe weighing her down, and is the reason why she is stuck. I think it's also important to note that while she sings and dances and performs in all of her glory, the weaver cannot see his work or support of Seren come to life. He can't see her dance or see her wear his fabrics. He only operates behind the shadows, forgotten. The Tessier, I think, is the saddest part of Seren's island. This is Renoir. This is how Renoir sees himself to Alen. He is stuck here forever sewing her fabrics for her dresses, so that she can dance and look beautiful and serene. His dedication is even in the actual design. The face is cracked and it reminds me of the curator, but opposite in color. His light is showing through, but it's broken and damaged. The front of the creature also has a small heart on its chest plate, and its entire body is made for its purpose. The base is a pure white depiction of Seren. She is the base, the foundation upon which Tessier is built. But most interestingly are all the pins in its body. Pin cushions are made to hold your pins, but that's exactly what his body is made for. He holds the pins for Alen so that she doesn't have to. He holds them for her. I think this is his way of showing the ways that he is hurt, the ways that Alen hurts him, and how the things he does for her hurt him. This is what the pins represent: pain. And they're everywhere. The entire area where he works is broken and falling apart, and the pins are endless. If the pins represent pain, then these are pains of the past or possibly the future, pains that always linger, that will always be there. In this falling apart, isolated, lonely place, Despair only works for her, takes her pain and exists for Seren, just like how Renoir exists for Alen. Everything he does is for her. He is doing the hard labor while she simply dances. I think this is such a sad reflection of how Renoir views their relationship and dynamic. In contrast to his depiction of Alen as Seren, this weaver, this creature, is really nothing. Just a hurt worker behind the scenes, forgotten. I think this reflects how Renoir keeps their family together. He keeps Alen together, and like Clea, who shoulders the weight of the responsibilities of the family, I think Renoir shoulders the pain. Throughout the entire story, we see that he has been given no room to grieve. He is constantly chasing one family member after another. First Alen and then Maëlle. When we speak with the fading woman, Clea tells us that Renoir is terrified of losing another family member, which is why he does what he does. Renoir will destroy himself. He will fill himself with pins, make himself the villain, if it means his family will be okay. I think that's what the Despair represents. The pain he endures, the loneliness that he feels doing it, and how much he does for those he loves, especially Alen. He doesn't want to fight, just how like the Despair isn't hostile. He doesn't want to stand against his wife or do any of this. He doesn't want to be the villain, but he will if he has to, because life and his wife keep putting Renoir in a position to have to be the one to make these choices for his family, which is really the crux of Renoir. Life keeps forcing cruel choices because that's all that Renoir knows. Even in his depiction of himself as the Weaver, he remains unwavering. Not only does he work tirelessly for her, he also shields Seren in the final battle if you don't kill him. But if you do kill the Despair, he drops an anti-charm picto. Quite ironic that the man absolutely charmed and enthralled by his siren of a wife would drop an item to combat those very things. It's a small thing, but I think it's very intentional. The easiest way to defeat her is to not be charmed by Seren. I'm sure he wishes he had this power himself. Alongside this anti-charm picto, there's another element that shows Renoir's true feelings. He curses you during the fight, the same way the fading man tells you he is cursed from turning a blind eye. The entire fight is reflective of Renoir's feelings. He is cursed, he is charmed, he is suffering for Seren. And when you fight him, he dies for her. The sadness of Despair is obvious, and after you defeat him, even Lumiere says their victory feels hollow. You're just hurting and killing someone who is already suffering, and someone who didn't want to fight you in the first place. This is Renoir and Alen. Renoir doesn't want to fight, just like Despair. But just like we forced him to fight, Alen has forced him as well. From everything that we've seen, Alen hasn't treated Renoir with love or kindness pretty much the entire story until the end. She's resentful that he wants her to leave, showcased in the song where the two are singing at each other. She's hurting him, discarding him, and demanding him to leave, all while he begs and pleads for their love. It's devastatingly sad. In Act 2, the song that plays in the world map has lines about Renoir being broken and crying, and forever having lost his son. Renoir is suffering and is fearing losing Alen to the canvas, and then his daughter Alysia too. His family is vanishing in front of him, and he's painting self-portraits of his grief and loneliness. The song Un Via Tamier is heartbreaking because it's Renoir begging Alen to leave, but she's telling him to let her go. The English translation is A Life of Loving You. It's Alen and Renoir singing about their love, and while Renoir sings about his love being forever, Alen sings about their love dying. He sings about continuing to love her, while she sings about continuing to paint. He says something like, "Even if our pulses play out of time sync, my love remains, waits." But Alen only tells Renoir to stop loving her. How tragic that must be to hear, to be told, to be felt. Renoir's love is undying and unbreaking. And while he declares his love and reminds his wife of his devotion, she is throwing it away. She is breaking his heart in the song. The lyrics are genuinely devastating. The way it's sung, so full of emotion, so desperate. Even if you don't understand the lyrics, you can feel the passion behind it, the way they are yelling at each other. They represent Alen and Renoir and their diverging paths. And while they are absolutely both hurting, Alen is twisting the knife, while Renoir fights to save her and their love and their family. I think this dynamic between them had already existed for a long time, but I also think the two were having problems long before Verso died. His death was really just the catalyst to more. When we speak with Clea, she says that neither of them are adult enough for the conversation they need to have, and she believes they're better apart right now than together, until they face their grief. She recognizes the flaws in their relationship, how Alen traps Renoir in her destruction, and how Renoir does absolutely anything to get her out of it. And she recognizes how this isn't the first time that this has happened. We also meet the fading man on Seren's island, another piece of Renoir. And he tells us a very sad and revealing story about him and Alen. He questions knowing people, knowing ourselves. How did he miss things? He questions how he didn't see. He says, "Is it a blessing to understand your darkest nature, or a curse to which we turned a blind eye? We lie to ourselves about the things we'd rather not admit or confront, about ourselves, about each other." He wonders what he didn't see, what he missed, that might have changed things. And he finishes by saying, "When did she start pulling away?" This piece of Renoir regrets missing the signs of Alen pulling away from him. This is a man experiencing heartbreak and wondering when it started. If you choose Verso's ending, Renoir is absolutely desperate for Alen's comfort and love. His body language and his demeanor show someone who has yearned for the touch of the person they need the most. Renoir needs Alen, and she's been gone. Not only that, they've been fighting for 67 years. But fighting implies two parties at fault when it's really just Alen essentially committing suicide, and Renoir trying to save her life. She's fighting him, but he's fighting for her. She trapped him within the monolith, made him suffer for 67 years. He's been completely closed off, stuck in isolation. That is cruel and genuinely heartless. I'd say this is probably close to torture. We saw how Simon lost his mind to the abyss. And I think in a lot of ways it is very similar to how Renoir must have felt here. Renoir's drafts are full of the dead axons that were never finished. It's full of other creatures he's created, but most of all, it's only him here. 67 years is a very long time to be alone. And by the way he speaks about it, he felt that time pass. I imagine this was extremely hard on him. How do you damn the person you love to a fate like that? For 67 years. And not only that, but Alen had planned to keep him there forever. She replaced him with painted Renoir. She created this whole other life and family. And she discarded her real husband, discarded their family and their life. Renoir stayed trapped under the monolith, while his wife spent her new painted life with replacements of the people Renoir loved the most, but most of all, a replacement of him. Did he have to watch as this idealized version of himself that Alen created hugged and touched and loved his wife, all the things that he couldn't do? Did he have to watch as they started this new family, and he was forgotten? I can't imagine the pain that someone would feel watching that. Alen was ready to let go of him, and yet all this time he spent fighting for her, while also trying to save her from herself. He spent 67 years questioning everything, wondering about the what-ifs, and lingered in his regret. Here was a man who is completely dedicated to his family, and yet he has been isolated for 67 years without them. The entire time he spent thinking, creating portraits of his family to remember them by. He created his act of love, the gommage. He did everything that he could. Despite Alen treating him so poorly, he kept fighting for her, even while fighting against her. Even in the final fight, Alen stands against Renoir. When he says it's supposed to be you and me, not you fighting me, she tells him to go home. Go and paint something else. And she's cold and heartless about it. This is one of the few times she speaks as Alen, and it's cold and callous. Painting used to be something they shared. The Fading Man speaks about it several times. Renoir speaks of how they made hundreds of canvas worlds together, how Alen taught him, how he doesn't know when they stop painting for the same reasons. This thing that they used to love has been tainted, evident by their arguing in the music. This is what their life's passion has been turned into. Cold, heartless Alen, telling him to go paint alone. Renoir is an emotional, devoted man, and I think he has been the opposite to Alen's harder self. We know from an interaction with Maëlle, when she's in the house, that Alen only let her hang up one single painting that she deemed worthy. Alen also painted Alysia with her scars. Alen seems cold and sometimes cruel, very similarly to Clea. And while we don't see those interactions with Alen, we see the remnants of her family experiencing them. We see how Clea seems so similar to how I imagine Alen would be, striving for perfection, expecting only the best, and living up to her own mother's expectations. We see how Renoir depicts himself, and how he sees his dynamic with his wife, doing everything for her and enduring her cruelty. We see how Alysia knows the knife of her mother's expectations, and knows that she didn't measure up. She sees her mother's blame, and how her mother made painted Alysia suffer. She knows the coldness of her mother. Even painted Renoir has been manipulated in Alen's image. He fights to protect the canvas, going against what the real Renoir wanted. We see how the creation and existence of painted Verso has made him make horrible decisions and made him literally want to die. We see how Verso's purpose and existence has been twisted and manipulated by Alen to shape this world how she wants it. Alen hurts her family over and over again, but Renoir seems to be her punching bag. She hurts him and discards him over and over. I wonder, in if there's 67 years of fighting, if Alen tried manipulating Renoir to make him see the appeal of keeping the canvas and Verso's soul alive. I wonder if he ever almost gave in. He wants to give his wife everything, and I know he struggled not to. If anything, I bet it angered Alen to not be given something by her husband, since to me it seems like that's what Renoir knows how to do. I don't think Alen wants to hurt Renoir, but I also think that she knows that she can. He will never stop loving her, never stop fighting, and I also think he'll never stop enabling her. Enable is probably the wrong word, but I don't think there's any limit to what Renoir would let Alen do to him, and I think she knows this. I think when you treat someone in a specific way over and over again, it's because you know that they'll let you. I'm not excusing the behavior of abusers, but this is often how people get stuck in that cycle. Abusers will keep pushing their limits. This is how I see Alen. She continues to make Renoir suffer for these 67 years. Suffer for his crime of wanting her to live. And for his crimes, he is trapped under the monolith. I think it's cruel. She both knows that Renoir will continue to do anything to save her. So trapping him is all she has to prevent him from erasing the canvas, but I also wonder if she ever thought about the after. If she truly was ready to sacrifice him by keeping him trapped there, eventually killing him just like she would have killed herself. Or did she ever ask herself, what will I do when I finally free him? I think the reality is that she knew that no matter how long he was trapped, no matter how much they fought, or the lengths that she went to, Renoir's love truly would not waver. He would be there afterwards no matter what. She takes his love for granted and pushes her abuse to new heights. I truly think what Alen does to Renoir is extremely cruel. This is not how you treat the people you love. The Desandre family, all of them are fucked up. Each one of them is some form of broken. They're all living within their grief, but Alen's actions are the most destructive to her entire family. And they're also the most selfish. I understand Alen is lost in her grief, and she is really the portrait of how bad it can get. But the destruction she has left in her wake is really unforgivable to me. Renoir may forgive her and will. Maëlle may forgive her and Clea may not care about forgiving her, but I just can't imagine being Renoir and being the subject of her abuse. I genuinely do think it's a form of emotional abuse. To trap the person you love in isolation while you repaint them and create your idealized version of them, then create a whole fictional life while you discard your real one. We saw how Verso was fucked up from being his mother's creation and being manipulated by her. How is Renoir able to shoulder all of this? How, at the end of everything that has been done to him, is he able to just forgive her and embrace her like he does? He is desperate for her. Because that is Renoir. Loyal, dedicated, unwavering in his love. In Verso's ending, he has forgiven her, no questions asked. He leans into her, desperate for her touch, desperate to love her, because that is all he's wanted to begin with. He wants the love of his life back. So he forgives. Because for Alen, Renoir will truly do anything, endure anything, and go to any length. And maybe that is the real tragedy of Renoir and Alen, this destructive dynamic, and how their love for each other and for their son is also destroying them. There is so much tragedy in this family and so much pain. And even though they're all hurting each other, that hurt stems from love. They're able to inflict this much pain on each other because they all love each other so much. It's how love works. With love comes pain, sadness, hurt, and eventually loss and grief. We endure all of these emotions loving someone. And I think the story of the Desandres and the people within the canvas really show this. How at the core of each and every story is really love and loss, and how it changes and guides us. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is really about being human. And even the axons and nevrons are part of that on a deeper level. Axons and nevrons might be in reference to axons and neurons. The neurons in your brains and the paths that they communicate along. Your thoughts, feelings, and emotions are made up of all the electrical impulses traveling across your neurons. In Clair Obscur, the nevrons and the axons are made to convey emotions and feelings and ideas. It's a small connection, but it's an interesting way to connect our brains to our creations, through everything from their designs to their names. These are the things that love and art are about. Through art, we can express our deepest emotions and try to understand them, which is exactly what Renoir was doing with his creations of the Axons, trying to understand how his family got here and trying to understand what he missed. It's a sad story. And I know this turned out being more about Renoir in some ways than Alen, but the Axons are Renoir's perspective. We really only know Alen through her family's eyes. Most of all, her devoted husband who refuses to leave her side. These are also just my interpretations of the symbolism and connections with Seren and the story. Some of these could be intentional or merely coincidence. And the devs are pretty keen on keeping everything up for interpretation by the fans, which I like. But let me know what you think. Do you have different interpretations? Did my own make you think differently? Let me know in the comments, and thank you so much for watching. Making these analysis videos about Clair Obscur Expedition 33 has been the most fun I've ever had making content, and I'm very thankful to everyone who has watched. I promise I read all the comments, I just haven't responded yet, but thank you so much. Thank you to my channel members, thank you to my Patreon members. Thank you all so much for your support. I'll see you next time.